Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude, where I do trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, I review YouTube channels, occasionally I'll review a movie, but really, I just do whatever the hell I want. The Mothman of Point Pleasant. The story of the Mothman, the legendary creature that terrorized a West Virginia town in the 1960s. On November 12th, 1966, in Clendenin, West Virginia, a gravedigger working in a cemetery spotted something strange. He glanced up from his work when something huge soared over his head, a massive figure that was moving rapidly across the cemetery from tree to tree. He would later describe the figure as a brown human being. This was the first reported sighting of what would come to be known as the Mothman, an elusive creature that, although now widely celebrated by the town it once terrorized, remains as mysterious as it was on the night that a few frightened witnesses first laid eyes on it. And the legend of the Mothman of Point Pleasant is born. Just 3 days after the gravedigger's initial report in nearby Point Pleasant, West Virginia, two couples noticed a gray-winged creature about 6 or 7 feet tall standing in front of the car they were all seated in. Eyewitnesses Roger Scarberry and Steve Mallett told the local paper that the beast had bright red eyes about 6 inches apart and a wingspan of 10 feet, and that it seemed to want to avoid the bright headlights of the car. According to the witnesses, the creature was able to fly at incredible speeds, perhaps as much as 100 miles per hour, one of the men told reporters. Although all agreed it did make for a clumsy runner on the ground. They knew that because the creature allegedly chased their moving vehicle to the outskirts of the town in the air, then scuttled into a nearby field and disappeared. Knowing how absurd this must have sounded to a local paper in a small Appalachian community in the 1960s, Scarberry insisted that the apparition couldn't have been a figment of his imagination. He assured the paper, "If I had seen it while by myself, I wouldn't have said anything, but there were 4 of us who saw it." And then there were more Mothman sightings over time. The papers at this point were skeptically calling it a bird and a mysterious creature, though they did print Mallett's description. It was like a man with wings. But more and more sightings were reported in the Point Pleasant area over the next year as the legend of the Mothman took shape. The Gettysburg Times reported 8 additional sightings in the short span of 3 days following the first claims, including 2 volunteer firefighters who supposedly saw what they described as a very large bird with large red eyes. One sighting, reported by Salem, West Virginia resident Newell Partridge, told of strange patterns that appeared on his television screen one evening, followed by a mysterious sound just outside his home. Shining a flashlight toward the direction of the noise, Partridge supposedly witnessed 2 red eyes, resembling bicycle reflectors looking back at him. Now this anecdote remains a popular one in the Mothman mythos, especially because it resulted in the disappearance of Partridge's dog, supposedly to the clutches of the fearsome beast. A simple explanation for the Mothman myth? Dr. Robert Smith, Associate Professor of Wildlife Biology at West Virginia University, dismissed the notion that a flying monster was stalking out the town, instead attributing the sightings to a sandhill crane, which stands almost as tall as the average adult man and has bright red flesh around its eyes. The explanation was compelling, especially given the number of early reports that had described the creature as bird-like. Some even hypothesized that the crane was perhaps deformed, especially if it made its home in the TNT area, what locals call a series of nearby bunkers that were used for manufacturing munitions during World War II. It has been suggested that the bunkers have leaked toxic materials in the neighboring wildlife preserve. Another Point Pleasant legend states that the creation of the Mothman was nothing more than the work of one very committed prankster, who went so far as to hide in the abandoned World War II munitions plant where many of the sightings occurred. The theory goes that when the national press ran with the Mothman story, spreading it across the country, panic set in. Locals became convinced they were seeing the Mothman in birds and other large animals, even long after the prankster had given up. The Mothman also bears a striking resemblance to several demon archetypes found among those who have experienced sleep paralysis, suggesting that the visions are nothing more than the embodiment of typical human fears pulled from the depths of the unconscious and grafted onto real-life bird or animal sightings when people panic. Then, there are the paranormal explanations, a morass of complicated theories that weave together aliens, UFOs, and precognition. They paint the Mothman as either a harbinger of doom or, more sinisterly, its cause, a legend that has its roots in the tragedy that befell the Point Pleasant community shortly after the Mothman arrived. And then there was the Silver Bridge collapse. On December 15th, 1967, just over a year after the first Mothman sighting, traffic was especially bad. The Silver Bridge, built in 1928 to connect Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with cars from end to end. It had been built in a time when cars were lighter. The Model T weighed just 1,500 pounds, a modest sum when compared to the 1967 average for a car of 4,000 pounds. Its engineers hadn't been particularly imaginative when it came to the future, and nor had they been especially cautious. The bridge's design featured very little redundancy, meaning that if one part failed, there was almost nothing in place to prevent other parts from failing as well. And on that cold December day, that was exactly what happened. Without warning, a single eye-bar near the top of the bridge on the Ohio side cracked. The chain snapped, and the bridge, its careful equilibrium disturbed, fell to pieces, plunging cars and pedestrians onto the icy water of the Ohio River below. 46 died, drowned, or were crushed in the wreckage. It was the second terrible and bizarre thing to put the small community of Point Pleasant on the map in a year, and some connected the two. In 1975, author John Keel conflated the Mothman sightings and the bridge disaster, as well as reported UFO activity, to create his book, The Mothman Prophecies. His story took hold, and the town became an icon among conspiracy theorists, ufologists, and fans of the paranormal. So where's the Mothman today? Point Pleasant's fame as the home of the Mothman legend hasn't waned in recent years. In 2002, a movie based on Keel's book rekindled interest in the Mothman. In the Mothman Prophecies film, Richard Gere plays a reporter whose wife seems to have witnessed the Mothman shortly before her death. He finds himself inexplicably in Point Pleasant several years later with no idea how he got there. He's not the only one in the area having trouble explaining himself. Several locals are experiencing premonitions of distant disasters, and there's talk of visitations from a mysterious figure called the Mothman. Richard Gere plays journalist John Klein in the Mothman Prophecies from 2002. The film, a supernatural horror and mystery, offers no conclusions, communicating instead an eerie feeling of disjointedness that was both panned and praised by critics. Most notably, the film popularized the image of the Mothman as a harbinger of doom. The idea that visitations from the Mothman predicted disaster led some believers to make ties to the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, the Mexican swine flu outbreak of 2009, and the 2011 nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan, among others. The Mothman can still be seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia today, in the form of a historical museum, open 7 days a week, and also as a 12-foot tall, chrome-polished statue, complete with massive steel wings and ruby red eyes. A festival commemorating the Mothman's visits has taken place annually for years, a fun celebration that attracts locals and tourists alike. If you're passing through West Virginia this September, consider swinging by the festivities to remember one of America's strangest and most intriguing local legends. Thank you. Now, how about a joke? I saw two chess masters in a lobby. They were bragging about their past wins. They were chestnuts boasting in an open foyer. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.